Hello, explorers. Welcome to StoryTinkr, where you, the listener, get to tinker with the story. Today, we'll paddle out with cousins Jude and Ellie as they explore a mysterious cove. What starts as a simple adventure leads to the discovery of a magical mermaid named Marais, who needs their help to save her underwater home. But there's a twist. At a key moment, you will decide what happens next. Will you follow Jude, Ellie, or explore both paths? Get ready to dive into an ocean of choices, riddles, and adventure. Let's begin the Mermaid's SOS. Chapter 1. Into the Hidden Cove. The sun was beginning to set over the shimmering waters as Jude and Ellie paddled their kayaks into a secluded cove. The evening sky painted the ocean in hues of pink and gold, and the waves lapped gently against the rocky shore. The water was clear, revealing schools of tiny fish darting below the surface, their scales catching the light like scattered jewels. Seaweed swayed lazily in the current, and the faint sound of gulls echoed overhead. Jude adjusted the strap on his binoculars and scanned the horizon eagerly. "I'm sure we'll spot one today," he said, his eyes glinting with excitement. "There's always dolphins around coves like this." Ellie grinned, raising her own binoculars. "Maybe we'll see a whole pod. Imagine them jumping in and out of the water like in those nature shows." She paddled slowly, her eyes darting from the horizon to the rippling surface below. "Look over there," Jude whispered, pointing to a distant splash. They both held their breath, waiting for another sign, but the water stilled, leaving only the gentle rhythm of the waves. "False alarm," Ellie said, lowering her binoculars. She sighed, but kept scanning the cove. "This place is still amazing, though. Look how clear the water is." She leaned over her kayak, watching a crab scuttle along the rocky bottom. "It's like a window into another world." "Yeah," Jude agreed, still looking out at the horizon. "It's kind of like something Jacques Cousteau would have explored. Can you imagine being one of the first people to really study the ocean?" Ellie nodded. "He was the one who invented the aqualung, right? The thing that lets divers breathe underwater?" "Yep," Jude said, smiling. "And he didn't just stop there. He made those documentaries that showed the whole world what was going on under the waves. My dad says he even inspired people to start protecting the ocean." Ellie let her kayak drift as she looked down at the water. "It's wild to think that without him, we might not know about things like coral reefs or how pollution hurts marine animals." Jude adjusted his grip on his paddle. He was like the ultimate adventurer and scientist. I mean, who wouldn't want to explore shipwrecks and discover new species? Ellie laughed. "Yeah, but you'd probably spend the whole time organizing all the fish into lists. And you'd be busy trying to make friends with the shark." Jude shot back with a grin. They both laughed, but their playful banter was interrupted by something unusual. Jude squinted toward the rocky shore. "Ellie, do you see that? It's glowing." Ellie turned, her brow furrowing. "That's not just sunlight." Curiosity propelled them forward. They paddled closer, their excitement tinged with a hint of nervousness. At first, the shimmering seemed to shift with the ripples of the water. Then, as they neared the rocky shore, it became clear. The shimmer was coming from a figure. Jude's kayak scraped softly against a rock as he stopped. Ellie froze, her jaw dropping. In front of them was a mermaid, her iridescent tail shimmering with shades of aquamarine, silver, and violet as it caught the last rays of the setting sun. Her long, seafoam green hair flowed around her like a halo, tangled with strands of kelp and bits of netting. Her skin had a pearly sheen, almost translucent, as if the ocean itself had shaped her. Her silver blue eyes, wide and filled with exhaustion, flickered between Jude and Ellie with a mixture of hope and fear. Along her arms and shoulders, faint patterns of bioluminescent spots pulsed gently, like underwater constellations. Her tail, pinned under a massive fishing net, twitched weakly, and her melodic voice trembled as she whispered, "Please, help me." Around her floated a heartbreaking mix of debris, bottle caps, shredded plastic bags, and fragments of colorful microplastics that glimmered like misplaced jewels in the water. "She's real," Jude whispered, unable to tear his eyes away. The mermaid stirred weakly, her melodic voice barely audible. "Please," she murmured, "help me." Ellie swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "We We have to do something. But she's a mermaid, Jude said, his voice a mixture of wonder and hesitation. We've never seen anything like this before. What if it's dangerous? She's trapped, Ellie said firmly, gripping her paddle, and she's asking for help. They exchanged a glance. There was no denying the fear and desperation in the mermaid's eyes. I'm Jude, and this is Ellie, he said gently, his voice steadying. We'll help you. The mermaid blinked slowly, her voice as soft as the lapping waves. Thank you, she whispered. My name is Marais. Chapter 2, Marais' Story. Jude reached out carefully, his hands trembling as he tugged at the fishing net wrapped around Marais' tail. The coarse cords were knotted tightly, digging into her shimmering scales. Ellie steadied her kayak beside him, handing him a small pocket knife. Here, this might help, she said, her voice soft but determined. Marais winced as Jude began slicing through the thick strands. I'll be careful, he promised, glancing up at her. Thank you, Marais said weakly, her melodic voice barely above a whisper. As the net fell away, Ellie scooped up some of the plastic debris floating around them. She held up a torn bag and a jagged piece of a bottle. This stuff is everywhere, she muttered. Marais' silver blue eyes flickered open, focusing on Ellie. My home? My reef? Is dying because of this. Jude paused, lowering the knife as her words sank in. Your reef? What do you mean? Marais took a shaky breath, her bioluminescent spots pulsing faintly along her arms. My home lies beneath these waters, a vibrant reef that has thrived for centuries. But the plastic, the chemicals, the warming currents, they have begun to destroy it. The corals are turning white, the fish are disappearing, and the balance of life is fading. Ellie frowned, looking down at the bits of plastic in her hands. That's horrible, she said quietly. Is there any way to fix it? Marais nodded slowly. Long ago, ocean explorers visited my reef. They saw the beauty of our world and knew it needed protection. They left behind a way to save it. An ancient map, hidden and guarded by riddles. The map leads to the knowledge and tools needed to restore balance, but I cannot find it on my own. I hoped someone would answer my call for help. Call? Jude asked, raising an eyebrow. Marais managed a faint smile. An SOS, she explained. I sent it in a bottle carried by the tides. I hoped it would reach someone who cares for the ocean as much as the explorers once did. Ellie gasped. The bottle we found last week, she exclaimed. It had a note in it, but it was all smudged and impossible to read. Marais nodded. That was mine. The message was simple. The reef is fading, please help. I never imagined you would come. Jude exchanged a look with Ellie. This is a lot, he said slowly. But if the reef is dying, we have to do something. Ellie nodded. We can't just ignore it. If we could find that map... Marais' eyes glimmered with hope. I can guide you to the first riddle, she said. The reef's protection was meant for those who truly care for its survival. You must be prepared to solve the riddles and face the challenges. We're ready, Jude said firmly, though he glanced at Ellie for reassurance. Ellie nodded. If we work together, we can figure it out. Right, Marais? The mermaid smiled faintly, her strength returning as she floated more easily in the water now that the net was gone. Yes, she said, but there is one thing you must decide first. Marais' bioluminescent patterns pulsed faintly, signaling her urgency. The reef can only be saved if two problems are solved. The source of the pollution must be stopped, and the ancient knowledge must be recovered. You will have to choose which path to begin with. Chapter 3. The Decision. Jude spoke thoughtfully. The map will give us the tools to save the reef. That should be our priority. Ellie shook her head. But if we don't figure out where all this trash is coming from, it'll just keep piling up no matter what the map says. We need to start there. Marais' gaze shifted between them. Both paths are important, she said softly, but you must choose where to begin. I will guide you, no matter your decision. Now, Jude and Ellie looked at each other, their expressions serious. The weight of Marais' words hung in the air, and they knew their choices would shape not only their journey, but the future of the reef itself. The water shimmered as Marais led Jude and Ellie to a hidden inlet beyond the cove. This way, Marais said, her voice growing steadier with each stroke of her tail. Her bioluminescent patterns began to glow more brightly, casting a soft light that danced across the water's surface. Jude and Ellie paddled quietly behind her, their earlier excitement giving way to quiet determination. As they reached a jagged outcrop of rocks, Marais turned to them. "This is where the first riddle is hidden," she explained, motioning toward a narrow underwater passage that glowed faintly. The explorers built these clues to test not just knowledge, but care and respect for the ocean. "Are you ready?" Ellie hesitated, glancing at the passage. "But we can't swim underwater for long," she said. "How are we supposed to see the riddle?" Marais smiled softly, raising one hand. Her bioluminescent patterns brightened, and a shimmering orb of light formed between her palms. "You need not worry," she said. With a graceful motion, she pushed the orb toward Jude and Ellie, and it split into two glowing bubbles. The bubbles floated gently down to rest around their heads, sealing comfortably just below their chins. Ellie touched her neck in surprise. "I can breathe," she said. "And we can talk," Jude added, his voice clear despite the bubble around him. His wide eyes fixed on Marais. "This is amazing." Marais nodded, her smile widening. "These air bubbles will stay with you as long as you need them," she said. "Now follow me." She dipped beneath the surface, her tail gleaming as she swam into the passage. Jude and Ellie exchanged a glance before diving in after her, their air bubbles glowing softly in the dim light. The narrow tunnel opened into a small underwater cavern where coral of every imaginable color decorated the walls. Marais gestured toward an ancient piece of stone covered in carvings. A piece of stone that could only have been identified by a mermaid. Ellie swam closer to read it, her curiosity overcoming her. The words etched into the stone seemed to glow faintly as she approached. She read aloud, "I'm light as a feather, but the strongest sailor can't hold me for long. What am I?" Jude frowned, thinking hard. "Light as a feather, but impossible to hold. It's not a physical object, then." Ellie tilted her head, her eyes scanning the carvings for more clues. "Maybe it's something you need to survive," she murmured. "Air," Jude said suddenly, his eyes lighting up. "It's air, our breath. You can hold it in your lungs, but not for long." As the answer was spoken aloud, the carvings in the stone glowed brighter, and a glowing trail that extended toward the next chamber appeared. Relief spread across Ellie and Jude's faces. "Follow the trail," Marais said, leading the way. The glowing trail split in two directions, one leading deeper into the reef's mysteries, and the other toward the open ocean. Marais gestured toward each path. "To the left is the way of the map," she explained. "It holds answers and tools that the explorers left behind to heal the reef. To the right, the currents will guide you to clues about the pollution source so that it can be stopped." Jude furrowed his brow, staring at the two paths. "The map could help us fix the reef faster," he said. "But what's the point if the trash keeps coming?" Ellie countered. "If we don't stop it, the reef will just get worse again." Marais watched them carefully, her silver blue eyes reflecting their struggle. "Listener, thank you for swimming along with us. The choice is yours," she said gently. "Both paths are vital, but each leads to a different beginning. I will guide you wherever you decide to go." Chapter 4. Time to Tinker. Listeners, this is where you come in. Jude and Ellie have reached a critical moment. They must decide which path to take first. Will you follow Jude's path and dive deeper into the mysteries of the map? Or will you follow Ellie's path and track the source of the pollution? There's no right or wrong choice, just different ways to explore and save the ocean. What will you do? To follow Jude, continue listening. To follow Ellie, skip ahead to her path. Chapter 5, Jude's Path, The Journey of the Map. Jude took a deep breath. "I think we should start with the map," he said. "If the explorers left tools to help heal the reef, finding them might be the fastest way to make a difference." Jude turned to Marais. "We're ready." Marais smiled softly, her bioluminescent patterns glowing brighter as she led them down the glowing trail. "Follow closely," she said. "The map's path will challenge your logic, but it will also test your connection to the ocean." The water grew cooler as they swam deeper into the reef, the colors shifting from vibrant corals to shadowy blues and greens. Marais stopped at another piece of carved stone, this one partially hidden by a curtain of seaweed. "This is the next riddle," she said. brushing the seaweed aside to reveal intricate carvings. Jude leaned closer, reading aloud. I move without wings. I roar without a mouth. What am I? Ellie tilted her head. Wings and a mouth. It must be something alive. Maybe, Jude said thoughtfully, but it also says it roars. What roars underwater? And Jude furrowed his brow, looking at the surrounding water. The ocean itself moves, he murmured, and it can roar during storms or against rocks. His eyes lit up. Waves! It's waves! As Jude spoke the answer, the carvings on the stone began to glow. A faint vibration ran through the water, and a hidden compartment in the reef wall creaked open. Inside was a small, sealed cylinder. It is the first piece of the map, Marais explained. The explorers divided it to ensure it could only be found by those who cared enough to solve the riddles. Jude turned the cylinder over in his hands. Inside contained a section of a map, almost like a puzzle piece. The map showed a section of the reef marked with symbols that looked like a mix of ancient carvings and marine biology illustrations. At its center was a glowing drawing of a spiral shell, surrounded by lines that radiated outward like the sun. Tiny symbols dotted the edges, fish, waves, and something that looked like a lighthouse. What did the symbols mean? Ellie asked. Marais studied it, her bioluminescent patterns flickering faintly. The spiral shell marks the heart of the reef, she explained. The symbols are clues to the next steps. Together, they will lead us to the place where the other pieces of the map are hidden. Jude squinted at the tiny lighthouse symbol. Do you think it's a landmark? Marais nodded. It is likely a guide, she said. The explorers loved to hide answers in plain sight, often blending them with the natural beauty of the ocean. Marais gestured toward another glowing trail. They followed the trail through an underwater tunnel that opened into a cavern unlike anything they'd ever seen. Glowing anemones lined the walls, and schools of fish darted between the coral, their scales shimmering like liquid rainbows. It's like a hidden world, Ellie breathed. It is a precious part of the ocean, Marais said softly, but it is fragile. The plastic and pollution have already begun to reach here. Jude looked around, noticing small fragments of debris nestled between the corals. Even this far down, he said, his voice tinged with frustration. The ocean is connected, Marais explained. What happens on the surface affects everything below. And they paused in the cavern, catching their breath as Marais turned to them. You have done well to find the first piece, she said. Jude smiled. Now let's keep going. Chapter 6. Ellie's Path, Following the Currents. Ellie glanced toward the open ocean path where the glowing trail led. If we don't stop the pollution, it won't matter what the map says, she said firmly. We need to figure out where all this trash is coming from. Ellie turned to Marais. We're ready. Marais smiled gently, her bioluminescent patterns shimmering like stars. The currents will guide us, she said. They carry more than just water. They carry the stories of everything that drifts through the ocean. The trio swam into deeper waters, leaving the vivid coral reef behind. The light faded as they ventured farther from the surface. Ellie scanned the water, noticing bits of plastic drifting by. A piece of a bottle label, a crumpled snack wrapper, and even a tangled strand of fishing line floated in the current. She picked up a few pieces, her brows furrowing. It's everywhere, she muttered. How does it even get here? The currents, Marais explained. They connect every part of the ocean. What is discarded on land often finds its way into the water. Now, Jude swam alongside her, looking at the debris floating in the water. It's like a river in the ocean, he said, his voice low. Everything ends up here, even the stuff from far away. As they followed the trail, Marais led them to a spot where the current swirled in a slow, circular motion. Here lies another riddle you must solve, she said, gesturing toward an ancient structure half buried in the seabed, covered in carvings. Ellie swam closer, brushing sand away from the carvings. She read aloud, I'm covered in spikes. I carry my home. Beneath the waves is where I roam. What am I? Ellie tilted her head, her lips moving silently as she repeated the riddle. Spikes and a home, she murmured. It must be some kind of creature. Jude joined her, scanning the ocean floor. A spiky creature. Maybe a crab? No, Ellie said thoughtfully. Crabs have shells, but they're not spiky. What about sea urchins? They're covered in spikes, and their shells are their homes. As Ellie spoke her answer, the carvings glowed softly, and a hidden compartment opened in the base of the stone. Inside was a cylindrical container filled with small plastic fragments. Alongside it was another piece of the map. Marais picked up the container of plastics, her expression grim. "It is a small example of what drifts through the currents," she said. "But the map will guide us to the source." Ellie retrieved the map piece, turning it over in her hands. It showed another section of the reef with a winding arrow that seemed to follow the currents. "These arrows must be telling us where to go next," she said. Ellie swam in a slow circle, her gaze fixed on the debris still floating in the water. "It's not just the ocean," she said. "All this had to come from somewhere, factories, cities, maybe even people who didn't think about where their trash would end up." Marais moved closer, her glowing patterns pulsing softly. "The current leads to a larger collection zone," she said. "If we follow it, we may uncover more answers." Ellie nodded, determination lighting up her face. "Then that's where we'll go," she said. Marais gestured to the glowing trail that extended farther into the open ocean. "The currents will carry us forward, but you must prepare yourselves," she said. "What lies ahead may reveal truths you are not ready for." Ellie glanced at Jude, then Marais. "We can handle it. The ocean depends on it." Chapter 7. A Shared Purpose. Marais guided Ellie and Jude back toward the heart of the reef. Both cousins carried what they had uncovered, Jude with the 2 pieces of the map and Ellie with her collection of plastics. The ocean around them felt alive with both urgency and promise. Marais stopped, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing faintly. "This is where your paths come together," she said softly, the 2 glowing trails merging. Ellie and Jude exchanged a glance. They hadn't realized just how different their approaches had been until now, yet both felt like essential parts of the same puzzle. "Look at this," Jude said, unrolling a piece of the map. The spiral shell at its center seemed to radiate light, with lines connecting to other symbols, waves, fish, and coral. "It's like a guide to restoring the reef." Ellie placed the other piece of the map next to his. Together, the 2 fragments formed a larger section of the map. The arrows Ellie had followed in the currents now led directly to the spiral shell marked as the heart of the reef. "It's a system," Ellie said, tracing the lines with her finger. "Everything is connected. Currents, reefs, even the trash." Jude looked at Ellie, his expression serious. "We need to combine what we've learned," he said. "Your work with the currents and pollution, and the map's instructions for restoring the reef." "The reef cannot survive without balance," Marais said. Marais paused, then gestured to the lagoon around them. "This place is special," she said. "It connects the heart of the reef to the outer currents. Use it as your starting point." Marais smiled faintly. "Take a deep breath and start with what you have," she said. "The pieces of the map will lead you to the tools you need. The currents will show you where to look for the source of the pollution. Together, these paths will unite to restore balance to the reef." Letting Marais' words sink in, Jude and Ellie turned their attention to the lagoon. The water was alive with movement. Tiny fish darting through the coral, seaweed, swaying with the currents, and the faint shimmer of bioluminescent plankton. Yet, among the beauty, fragments of plastic floated, a stark reminder of the challenges ahead. Ellie took a deep breath. "Then let's get to work," she said. "We've got a lot to do." Jude smiled, determination flashing in his eyes. "And we'll do it together." Marais swam closer to Jude and Ellie, extending her hand with her fingers slightly splayed. As she touched Jude and Ellie's hands, a small burst of glowing bioluminescent bubbles appeared between their palms, swirling upward like tiny fireflies in the water. "I think that was a mermaid high five," Ellie said to Jude with a giggle, noticing the smile on Marais' face as she swam away. A perfect reflection of the ocean they had pledged to protect. Chapter 8. Restoring the Reef. The heart of the reef lay before them, a sprawling underwater marvel alive with movement and color. Vibrant corals branched outward like trees, while schools of fish swirled in intricate patterns. But it wasn't perfect. Bleached coral patches and stray bits of debris stood out like scars on a masterpiece. This is the reef's center, Marais said, her voice tinged with both pride and sorrow. Its beauty endures, but its strength fades. Nah. Jude and Ellie unfolded the pieces of the map they had collected. The spiral shell, Jude said, pointing to the central symbol. It has to be here. This is where the explorer's tools are hidden. And look at this, Ellie added, tracing a series of arrows that radiated outward from the shell. These must represent the currents. If we can follow them, we might find where the pollution is entering the ocean. Marais floated beside them. You are on the right path, she said, but the map's final piece remains hidden. Only by solving the last riddle will its full purpose be revealed. The trio swam toward the reef's center, where a massive coral formation rose like a towering castle. Excitement buzzed between them, their hearts racing with anticipation. At the base of the formation was the final stone carving, partially covered by swaying seaweed. Ellie turned to Marais, her eyes wide with wonder. Can you read the last riddle for us? Marais nodded, her bioluminescence glowing brightly and casting shimmering light across the coral. As she approached the stone, a melodic hum began to rise from her throat, soft and enchanting. Then, with a voice as clear and fluid as the ocean itself, she sang the riddle. I guide sailors at night, I twinkle, but I'm not a star. What am I? A lighthouse, Jude said immediately, his excitement growing. It has to be. The explorers probably left something near a lighthouse on the surface. Ellie frowned thoughtfully. But this reef is underwater. There's no lighthouse here. They scanned the coral tower and Jude gasped as he spotted a faint carving near the top, a spiraling shape that mimicked the shell on the map. Above it, lines radiated outward like beams of light. It's not a lighthouse above the water, Ellie realized. It's the coral itself. It guides life in the ocean, just like a lighthouse guides ships. Jude placed his hand on the carving, and the coral began to glow softly. A hidden compartment opened, revealing a final cylinder holding the remaining section of the map. It's all here, Ellie said as they fit the last piece into place. The completed map illuminated, showing the full reef system and highlighting both restoration sites and pollution sources. Marais smiled, her silver blue eyes reflecting the light of the map. This is the knowledge the explorers left behind, she said, the tools to restore the reef's health and the wisdom to prevent further harm. Jude and Ellie got to work immediately. Following the map's guidance, they planted coral fragments to rejuvenate the bleached areas, cleared debris from the water, and worked with Marais to spread seeds from a special pouch of restorative sea plants hidden with the map. As they worked, Ellie glanced at the map again. The arrows that represented the currents seemed to point toward a distant point on the horizon. That must be where the pollution is coming from, she said. We need to follow it when we're done here. In agreement, Jude nodded. We will. The ocean around them seemed to shimmer with renewed life. Fish darted through the newly planted coral, and the soft hum of the reef's ecosystem grew louder. Marais' bioluminescent patterns glowed brighter, her strength returning with the reef's recovery. You have done well, she said, her voice steady and warm. But the work is far from over. The currents still carry harm to these waters. Ellie tightened her grip on the map. Then we'll stop it, she said. We know where to go now. And we'll keep coming back to help, Jude added. The reef isn't just something you fix once, it's something you take care of. Marais smiled, her expression full of gratitude and hope. The ocean is lucky to have you, she said softly. As they floated together in the heart of the reef, the light from the restored coral reflected around them like the stars above, a reminder of both the beauty and the responsibility that came with their mission. Chapter 9. A Renewed Hope. The sun was beginning to set as Jude and Ellie surfaced near their kayaks, the shimmering water reflecting the vibrant hues of the sky. They were tired, their limbs heavy from hours of work, but their hearts felt full. Marais floated nearby, her bioluminescent patterns flickering softly in the fading light. The reef below was already beginning to show signs of renewal. The coral fragments they had planted swayed gently with the current, and small fish darted between them, as if welcoming the change. You have done so much, Marais said, her voice melodic and warm. The reef feels your care. It is stronger because of you. Ellie smiled. We couldn't have done it without you guiding us, Marais. Marais dipped her head gracefully. It was your courage and determination. Thank you for helping me. Jude nodded, his gaze steady. We'll come back to check on the reef, he added. It's not just about fixing it once, it's about making sure it stays healthy. Marais smiled, her silver blue eyes shining with gratitude. You understand what it means to care for the ocean, she said. It is not a single act, but a way of being. As they climbed back into their kayaks, the weight of the completed map and their discoveries felt less like a burden and more like a responsibility they were ready to carry. Before they paddled away, Marais swam closer. In her hands, she held a glowing shell that shimmered with hues of aquamarine and violet. Take this, she said, handing it to Ellie. It is a piece of the reef's heart, a reminder of what you have done and what still lies ahead. Ellie held the shell carefully, her eyes wide. It's beautiful, she whispered. Jude leaned over to look. It's like the reef is alive in there, he said. It is, Marais said softly. Keep it close and let it remind you of the bond we share with the ocean. As the cousins paddled, the glowing shell rested between them, a symbol of their adventure and the work still to come. Ellie looked over at Jude, her paddle slicing through the water. You know, she said with a grin, we're going to have the best story to tell when we get home. Jude chuckled. Yeah, but how are we going to explain Marais? Ellie shrugged. Maybe we'll keep her for ourselves. From the water, Marais watched them go, her iridescent tail gleaming one last time before she disappeared into the depths. As they reached the shore, the cousins turned back to look at the ocean, its vastness stretching far beyond the horizon. For a moment, they were silent, each lost in thought. We've got a lot to do, Ellie said finally. Jude nodded. But we've got each other, he said, and the ocean. With that, they headed home, their kayaks cutting through the calm water. Behind them, the reef pulsed gently with life, a reminder of what could be achieved when care, courage, and curiosity came together. The end. Final reflection. Every action, no matter how small, creates ripples that spread far and wide. Jude and Ellie's story is just one example of how curiosity, teamwork, and determination can make a difference. What ripple will you create? Whether it's picking up trash, learning about the environment, or sharing your knowledge with others, you have the power to shape the future. The ocean story continues. Will you be part of it? Fun facts about the ocean and conservation. The ocean is a place of wonder, adventure, and mystery. By learning more and making small changes, you can help protect this amazing underwater world for generations to come. What is an SOS? SOS is a special signal people use to ask for help in emergencies. Some people think it means save our ship or save our souls, but it doesn't stand for anything. It's just a quick and easy way to say, help me, in Morse code. Bioluminescence is nature's nightlight. Some sea animals, like jellyfish and certain fish, can glow in the dark. This is called bioluminescence. They use their glow to scare predators, attract mates, or catch food. Coral is alive. Corals may look like rocks, but they're actually living animals. Each coral is made up of thousands of tiny creatures called polyps. These polyps build coral reefs by working together, creating homes for many ocean animals. Jacques Cousteau changed the world. Jacques Cousteau was a famous ocean explorer who helped invent scuba diving gear so people could breathe underwater. He made movies about the ocean to show people why it's important to protect marine life. Ocean currents are like conveyor belts. Ocean currents are like giant conveyor belts that move water, heat, and food around the planet. They even help control the weather. Without them, the Earth would be very different. Plastic can last for centuries. Plastic takes a really long time to break down, hundreds of years. A plastic bottle thrown in the ocean today might still be floating there when your great-great-grandchildren are grown up. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is huge. In the Pacific Ocean, there's a giant patch of floating trash called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's mostly made of plastic, and it's so big, it's twice the size of Texas. You can help save the ocean. Even small actions can make a big difference. Try using a reusable water bottle, saying no to plastic straws, or picking up trash when you see it. Every little bit helps keep the ocean clean and safe for animals. Here are some reflection points for grown-ups to discuss after listening to the Mermaid's SOS. These can encourage meaningful conversations about the story's themes, lessons, and connections to real life. The importance of teamwork. What can we learn about working together even when we have different ideas? The power of choices. How do our choices in real life, like reusing items or recycling, impact the world around us? Empathy and helping others. Why was it important for Jude and Ellie to help Marais, even though she was different from them? How can we show kindness to others in our daily lives? Exploring curiosity. And how can learning new things about nature help us take care of it? Action and responsibility. The story showed how Jude and Ellie took action to make a difference. Are there any actions we could take as a family to help our local environment? Thank you for joining Jude and Ellie on their story. At a key moment, they needed you, the listener, to decide what happened next. Your choices shaped their adventure and helped save Marais' reef. But the journey doesn't end here. There are always more adventures to explore and choices to make. Why not tinker with another story? If you enjoyed this tale, visit us at StoryTinkr.com for more interactive stories. Keep imagining, keep exploring, and most of all, keep tinkering with stories. Thanks for listening. Want to tinker with another story? Click to explore more. And don't forget to subscribe for more storytelling magic at StoryTinkr.com.